Hello everyone and welcome to the next episode of our webinar series. And in this episode, we are proud to have a Ball State alum who actually, surprise, surprise, did not begin his career in sales, but actually went on into sales. And guess what? He is making a very good living off sales. It's an absolute pleasure to have Mo Bunnell out here, who is an alumnus of the school and is sitting in warm Atlanta right now. And we are out here in cold Indianapolis. So hi, a big hi, and welcome to the show, Mo.
Oh, David, thank you. I'm so excited to do this show and to tap into your expertise around sales. I'm so proud to have been an undergraduate at Ball State, and I'm so proud that the school has one of the best professional selling programs in the world. I think it's pretty neat.
Absolutely, thanks a lot. And for the audience out there, it is very, very interesting. So Mo was recently visiting our school, and he was talking about his book. And the book has a very interesting title called The Snowball System: How to Win More Business and Turn Clients into Raving Fans. And I think that got me hooked in the terms of raving fans, because for once we have a book not just focused on getting business, but actually making sure that we deliver on our promises as well, with the idea for future business. But again, for those of you who are considering a good book in sales and looking for a good read, don't trust what I have to say, but actually there are some very, very big names like Daniel Pink, who's written the book To Sell is Human, and we have the expert from Wharton, Adam Grant, who's also written kind of an endorsement for the book. So again, when at the end of this call, I'll again read out the name of the book, and we'll make sure that we have links to the book as well. It's something that I'm reading through, I'm going through the process, and it's made for some fascinating reading. But enough about me. But Mo, thank you again for taking time off your busy schedule. And essentially, I want to begin off with the title, The Snowball System. And what, again, tell me a little bit more about how this book came into being and how the title, sort of did you come to that title as such?
Yeah, well, it's actually sort of a fun thing. I started my career as an actuary, and I was an actuarial science major at Ball State. I absolutely loved the depth of expertise that I had to learn to be an actuary. And then I was in a consulting firm, and they felt like I was an actuary with a personality. So they asked me to go into business development. And I was struggling because I wanted to have a system for how to develop business in a way that was always 100% of the time the right thing for the client. I wanted to play the long game. I wanted to do the things that were right for them. And I couldn't find a book on it. I could find all these systems around sort of closing the deal, like you slide this fancy pen across the table at a fancy steak place, and get some rube to sign on the bottom line, like that. Like it's like the short-term idea is the only thing that matters. And I just believe the complete opposite, that playing the long game, that doing the right thing for clients was always the right thing. So when we were looking for a wrapper or a title around a system that did that, we came up with the title, The Snowball System. Because if you're always playing the long game, you're doing little things every day that are going to help your future self. They're going to start the snowball rolling. They're going to start to create momentum in this ecosystem of relationships that you have that eventually is unstoppable. And when we came up with the title, Dave, I've got the book here, we even felt like, gosh, we should have a visual. Like we should have a visual that shows momentum. And it was funny because the first image I got back from the publisher was this one snowball that was sitting there melting. I'm like, no, that's not what we're trying to do. This should show momentum. So we ended up with not only the title, but an image that sort of reflected the idea of playing the long game and building momentum in your life so that you're helpful for your clients.
I'll tell you what I absolutely love about that is, for me, that momentum, a lot of times, if you do it well, is not just created by you, but it could be taken forward by your customers. And that's what I love about the fact that you're talking about raving fans is, it could be, of course, every sales, depending upon how complex the sale is, you need to have different people who need to make that decision. I can see it applied to one customer as well, but from the whole ecosystem, I can actually also see. And that goes back into your title, which talks about turning clients into raving fans, is that momentum could be as much built by you in small steps, but it could be carried forward by your customers who can become your vocal advocates going forward. And I think that's pretty much why I like the concept. So when I took a look, I'll be perfectly honest, is when I took a look at the snowball system, and I have a two young daughters. So essentially, I was thinking of Snowball from the movie Frozen. But again, from that perspective, but the idea is that you pick it up and then you actually see the fact that it builds up, and then you start thinking about, wait a minute, I see where he's going with this. And the link to the customers becoming raving fans, for me, is what is very, very, very interesting in your book. The reason is we talk about new books on sales like the Challenger Sale. We talk about spin selling. All of that are fantastic books, but a lot of them talk about getting customers. It's not that they're not talking about, okay, we get the customers, and then after that, it's not that they don't talk about it, but I think what I like in your book is the fact that your momentum starts after you get that customer, in my opinion. That's the way I read the book. It starts
David.
after that, because if you do the good job, if you do it well, those customers are the ones you're going to create internal champions in the customer's organization that actually goes in there as well. Let me actually pause here and let me ask you this question, which I thought was also interesting in your book, is you talk about this being relevant for external business development, but in my experience, you see that salespeople struggle with getting internal buy-in as well within their own organization. So tell me a little bit more, because I really like that part about your book, because you actually focus on that as well.
We do, and that's that's a great question. And we've done this big podcast tour around the book. Nobody's asked that yet, David.
Yeah.
I think you're onto something. At most of our clients, they deal with heavy, complicated things that are bespoke. They have to be customized for the client. We've got some clients where there's just widgets and they're selling widgets and there's not much customization. But at most of our clients, there's a heavy depth of expertise in what they provide their clients. So what that means is you've got to customize everything. So the same skills that are used to create a positive future for your clients in a way that they may or may not recognize out of the gate, you're helping them craft a vision where they can be more successful by hiring you. Those same skills of very positive influence are equally applicable on the internal side. And when things have to be customized, you not only have to get yeses with the external client and with the people that are influencing them, but you also have to get the yeses to actually deliver those things that you've crafted over at the client internally. For example, as a researcher, you've heard of the IKEA effect and the idea that people, the mental heuristic that people buy into what they help create.
Yeah.
And there's specific steps we've laid out in the books, 4 specific ones, that are equally applicable to create the IKEA effect and buy-in externally. Those same skills can be learned to create the same influence internally. I mean, what do you think? You deal with super complicated sales situations all the time yourself.
Actually, to be honest, the more super complicated it is, the more you need internal buy-in.
Yes.
So essentially, a lot of times when we have dealt with key account managers, the biggest frustration they hear is, why is it so much more easier for me to get the yes from the customer? And I spend 3/4 of the remaining time, 1/4 is spent on paperwork, right? So you always have these administrative tasks and everything else. But the remainder of the time is actually spent going out there and convincing people within my own organization and making them realize that if we don't have customers that we keep happy, we are all out of jobs. And I think that's what I think you hit the nail on the head. And that's extremely critical for you to understand, is that your ability to not just get the sale. You can get the sale by saying things that the customer wants to hear. But the key is actually in your ability to live up to your promises and deliver on those promises that sometimes go beyond your control, and your ability to actually get people within your organization on board, in my opinion, is extremely critical. And I think the art of persuasion that you talk about, which is, we'll get to that in just a minute, where you talk about the art of persuasion with the customers, is as relevant as to people. And that's one of the things I absolutely love. But what I also like is, okay, I'm an academic geek, let's face it. But actually you have a practitioner out there. You do quote a lot of, you're being kind of influenced by a lot of academic work from a wide variety of disciplines. And that's what I really like. And what made you actually turn to academics and think of us as not just geeks, but actually we can do something that might be interesting?
Well, I love research and I love data and I love facts. I think part of that's that whole, I'm an actuary in recovery that I love. And I even love following baseball and sabermetrics and what the new data sciences show around how to design and execute a proper baseball team. So those kind of desires for facts and what works and what doesn't, I've tried to apply back to business development and sales. And it was the insights that research provides that shows the facts of why does somebody say yes to one thing for another. Recent research out of Cornell and Western University in Canada found a face-to-face ask was 34 times more likely to get a yes than the same ask or that same request over email. 34 times, not percent, but times. It's when facts like that, when you read them and you dig into the great peer-reviewed research that you're a big part of, when you realize facts like that, then what we do is we incorporate them into the steps and the processes that we're teaching. So to your point, in our classes and in the Snowball system, we've looked at thousands of different studies, and we found at this point about 135 that deliver really hard-hitting, powerful, fact-based, research-based insights that are important to know as a business developer. And then we've pulled that all into our training systems in our book. And in the book, we chose to cite about the 30 or so that are the most important, so that if the reader wants to dig in further and loves this kind of thing, they can go back into the back of the book and download the exact research paper that we're quoting and dig into the whole thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually a kind of vindication for the research that we do, is the fact that, hey, we can talk about it in controlled conditions, but you actually tested it out, and you're actually saying that, you know what, okay, there's a lot of papers out there, but some of them actually make a lot of sense that can be put into practice. And guess what? We can make money of what these geeks are saying out there. So thanks for that, Mo. But I guess we just have to say that you need somebody with an actuarial science background who believes in numbers to actually go out and prove it as well. So, and I think that's really, really great. And essentially what you say is that there are a lot of wonderful tips and tricks in the book that you talk about. But what struck me were the 3 core principles, which in the interest of time, I would rather have you talk a little bit about that, which was the concept of managing your opportunities and managing your relationships and managing your yourself. Can you tell a little bit more about each one of these?
Yeah. Well, what would you prefer, David? Should we focus on one and sort of debate and talk about it back and forth, or should I cover all 3 at once?
Preferably, because what I want to do is that we can always talk about future webinars, and that's what I would love to go into each one of these. But if you could talk a little bit about each one of them, so that it gives people who might be actually interested in picking up the book and reading it, is what are your core messages in all 3 of these?
Oh man, I'd love to. So I'm pretty passionate about this. So let's start with do the order that you suggested. I loved it. Managing your opportunities being the first one. The science behind what somebody needs to experience, if you think of a buying experience, the science behind what they need to experience to say yes to something is very compelling. And the order we lay out in the book in our training classes is that first we need to listen and learn, and start with the prospect or the client and to figure out what their issues are. And the quick version of the research here is that when people talk about their own opinions, the pleasure center of the brain lights up. Hugely important. It's the same area that lights up when people have great food, when they're in stimulants, even when they're having sex, just quoting the research. So we want to light up that pleasure center and give them an amazing experience about talking about their own issues. Then we want to tuck behind that, creating some curiosity about how we might be able to solve those issues. Curiosity is an intrinsic motivator. People enjoy reading a mystery novel, not just skipping to the end and knowing Joe did it in the parlor. They want to unfold over time, and that goes for buying too. So once we've talked about them, we've talked about how we may solve their issues in their words and their priorities that we've learned. Now we can build everything together using the IKEA effect and talk about how we can work together to solve their issues. Go back, do the same thing internally like you suggested. And if things go in that order, it's so easy to get a yes, to gain approval, so to speak. So that's the idea of managing opportunities, is always thinking, where is the buyer at in an amazing process, and what can we do proactively next to design a great process to keep them moving forward. So why don't I come up for there and see what you think, and we can jump into the other 2.
Actually, what you're saying is, recently I was involved in a kind of a chat with some folks on a LinkedIn conversation, and the question was, you talk about the buying process and how we need to work together and make the customers curious in every step along the process. And it is actually building on this, because essentially the challenge that many companies face is that they start saying, you know what, hey, we have a buying process and we have a sales process, and reconciling that, they spend way too much time reconciling that fact, saying how does our sales process map onto the buying process. But actually, let's not forget is that at the end of the day, it's about the buying process. If you don't understand what is keeping the buyer up at night, or whatever it is, that you know what, you may not even work a lot on trying to map your sales process, but if you don't understand that part, that makes it that much more harder for you to, if you're too wedded to your own sales process. So I'm all in terms of understanding. But of course, one of the things I always say is it's not about bending over backwards. It's about telling the customer, it's about understanding the buyer and educating the buyer, saying there are sometimes what they expect is something that they actually don't need. So that's the only thing what I say is that it's not that you completely get rid of your sales process, but you need to understand how the customer's buying process is, and then start mapping your way of working, and then telling them that, you know what, there are certain things you should expect. Something I think this is beyond what we can do at this point in time, but do you really need it? And that's, for me, is the way. Hopefully it's a long-winded answer to what you're asking for, but I think you're spot on in terms of focusing on the customers, trying to understand their situation is what is going to help you get that customer to say that they bought something rather than the fact that they were sold something. And that pretty much, so what you're talking about, the managing the opportunity, the way you put it, is pretty much what we usually say, but except that we say very trite things like, you know, the customer should feel that they're buying something rather than they're being sold something. So it's right up, except that you put it in a more elegant and eloquent way as well. So that's pretty much what my thoughts on it are. So for whatever it's worth.
I love it.
Yeah. So the next one, the managing the relationships part. Or did I get that? It was managing relationships, right? So yeah.
Yes. No, you nailed it. And we have a short little one-liner on this that's a nice transition or segue. It's sort of like a great deal might make your year. You know, that's the managing the opportunities part. But a great relationship could make your entire career. Yeah. And that's the managing relationships part. And you nailed it before when you were talking about as soon as somebody buys something, the relationship part is just beginning. We want to create raving fans. We want them so enamored with the way that we provide our solution that they're running around telling others. So what we've done is we've actually, with valid definitions where you can tell exactly where somebody is, we've divided up a relationship into 7 stages. On the beginning side, it's somebody you'd like to meet that you haven't met with. So the relationship doesn't even exist yet. In the 7th stage, somebody's actively referring you to others without you even asking. You have so many credits in the bank, they love you so much that they're actively telling their network about you. And specifically how you get from 1st to 7th step, Deva, to get to your question, is you've got a salesperson or a business developer has got to write down the people that they want to emphasize. There's just no way these days where you've got 1,000 or 5,000 people in your Rolodex that you can keep in touch with everybody. So the first thing about managing your relationships is culling that list down to the top, say 6, 8, or 10 people that are the most important to your future success. You may know them well, you may not, but the most important, not the easy, but the most important. And you invest like crazy in those relationships, proactively, always being helpful, and making sure that you're in front of them with some kind of asset, some kind of gift of knowledge, some kind of investment, at least say once a month. And if you do that every month over a year, then these people start to become raving fans of yours. They start to recommend you more. You're always taking the next strategic step in the relationship and investing in them. I mean, back to you. What do you think?
Couple of them. First of all, the first thing when you said Rolodex, I was like, Mo, you and I are follically challenged, which means that, you know what, Rolodex, when I talk to my young kids, they do not even know what a Rolodex is. So, but I completely agree with what you say. The idea is that we have so many contacts, okay, be it LinkedIn, be it whatever it is. But the idea is that there are ways by which today you can keep track of who your relationships are. Of course, the technology is out there, but you should put the effort in saying who is going to be important enough for you to be in your system. And technology today with things like, you know, account-based marketing and technology can help you automate some of these messages. But in front of those messages, just a small personal word could go a long way towards maintaining that relationship. And I absolutely love what you said. And I'm a big fan, and again, I don't know what you think about it, is give tidbits, give knowledge, share knowledge with the people that you have, because keeping it to yourself in today's day and age, customers can find it elsewhere. That if you become the point where they say, you know what, yeah, of course I can, that is written by somebody else, but if I go to Mo, or if I go to the Bunnell Idea Group, or if I go to Ball State, depending upon whatever it is, if I go to them, they will make sure that they will make it easy for us to give us the cutting edge information. And it's that information which eventually leads to that relationship, which is where you give something. And the idea is that then you have the concept of reciprocity that comes from the academic world, where you say, people then saying, you know what, we need to give something back. And I think that is something that is absolutely spot on. So Rolodex, I think you and I will pick Rolodex. The youngsters today should realize that, hey, there are technologies out there that can actually help them do this. But the key is give something to actually get that. I hope that I didn't make too much fun of our age out here, Mo, but I was just smiling when I said Rolodex, because I mentioned this to my students the other day in class when I talked about cold calling and stuff, and they did not even know what a Rolodex was. I'm exaggerating, of course.
Yeah.
So I think it's spot on. And I think I really like the fact is that when you create Raving Fans, and that's the whole point, right? Because they go on and do your marketing for you.
Yes.
They are the ones, and usually they are the ones who will go out there and tell other people, you know what, that is a reliable person. And I think in today's day and world, I think there are two things happening in the world today. One is like what I call the Amazonification of expectations. That is, Amazon has pretty much messed up everybody's life in terms of how they're exceeding expectations all the time. The same thing comes back in B2B relationship. The other thing which is more relevant to what we are talking about here is what I call it the trip advisory of things. That is, people don't trust the service provider. They trust other people, other customers who have been in the same situation.
Yes.
You do a good job, you keep somebody happy, and somebody endorses you, or somebody says something good about you in private situations or in other kinds of things. Or today, they share something. You write something out and they shout out saying, hey, this is a share of the person. Here's a great content out there. And that is going to give you much more credibility, a much better opening, rather than you going and telling them, hey, I am this person, I can do this for you. So that's, for me, is why I think investing in relationship by giving first is going to help you a long way in the long run, because again, at the end of the day, is that's pretty much what you need to be taking a look at. And not to mention that your customer today might give you business, then they might not have no need for your services, but that does not mean that they don't like you. It's just that opportunities are not there with them. So does it mean that we just let them go at that point in time? No, that's not what it is. So that's what I really like about the fact that look at the people that you want to invest in, and then do it not from the perspective of how much they're going to give you later on, but the idea that you genuinely want to help them out. And I personally think it'll come back a long way eventually as well. And that's a nice segue.
You just nailed it.
And segue to the last one. And again, we could talk about this more, but I think we need to have more webinars talking about this. But tell me about managing your own self, because I think that is a nice way to kind of conclude what we're talking about. And then I want to say some things to the audience as well.
That sounds great. Yeah. So if the first steps are sort of looking at through the lens of your opportunities and always proactively moving those forward, and the second is looking at through the lens of your relationships, doing the same thing, proactively moving them forward, not just going to the easy, the people you already know, but focusing on the people that are harder to get to, that are more influential, that can have a big impact. Always strategically being helpful. That third piece of managing yourself is the hardest to do, because you're busy. We've got email yelling at us. You've got quarterly reviews. You've got to manage your team. There's all these things that are pulling you away from doing the high-end, deeper work, really impactful business development activities. So we've got to hack our own habits if we want to do that well. And one of the easiest ways we found to look at this, it's sort of a personal change management plan, if you will, is 6 words: think big, start small, scale up. So think big. I want to become the best business developer in my company, in my organization that they've ever seen. I want to blow the doors off my numbers. Well, that's stuff that's going to happen a year, 2, 5 years from now. And it can be a bit overwhelming, but we want to have that aspirational goal. So start small. What that means is, hey, I'm just going to send 3 proactive outreaches to people that are really important to my shorter term relationship success. I'm going to send 3 outreaches next week. I'm going to personalize them. I'm going to strategically pick them. I'm going to make them super helpful and individualize that helpfulness like you talked about. And that's going to be hard. It might take a couple hours of research and work and personalization, but darn it, I'm going to do it. That's start small. Scale up says, The next week, I'll do a little bit more. The week after that, I'll do a little bit more. It's hard to carve out time to do these really strategic, proactive things. But if we can just start with a couple hours next week and continue to build on that momentum, if we do 3 really hard but impactful things a week over a whole year, we're going to have about 150 of those. Over 10 years, we have 1,500. So it's always about thinking about how do we do the important, not the easy, and carving out time week over week over week and never missing a week, never not doing something that's going to be an investment in our future self, so to speak. And in that way, we can hack our own habits and become even more successful than we thought we could.
Absolutely. And for me, this at this point it became a self-help book. You know what I mean? So up to this point in time, it was that. So I said, wait a minute, I was looking. But I think for me, when I was looking at this, is that could be easily applicable for any. It doesn't have to be in business development. It could be for anything. But the powerful thing here is it could be as applicable for leaders.
Yeah.
And as it is to individuals at the people when you start a career as well. Because the idea is that you really need to think big, because if you don't think big, there's no reason for why you need to be looking at doing the small things, because there's no reason for you to be doing that. And I really like that, because too many times it's great to think big, but if you also want to act big right away, you're going to buy. Again, isn't that what they say, that the best way to eat an elephant is one piece at a time?
Exactly.
It's the same way. So essentially the idea is that how do we want to try and do that? And I think that's for me is something that is really, really hacking your own habits is critical for at any stage in your career, be it for business development. But if we buy into the fact that all of us are in the business of sales, right? The business development, it could be that if I am not in sales, but if I am a person jockeying for a promotion, the business development I'm doing is I am the product. I am doing it for myself. So the key, that's pretty much why for me this is a book as much for people in business development and sales as it is for any person. It could easily be translatable into a kind of a self-help book as well. And again, the idea is that the audience is going to lap it up differently. But I really think this has a lot of implications for people at different stages. Does not always have to be in a sales context. And that's what I really like about this book, because all the things apply there as well. And while we would like to talk more about this, Mo, I think what I'm going to do is at this time I'm going to pause, and I'm going to say that maybe we'll pick it up in the next conversation. And that's something that we can definitely look forward to. But I want to tell the audience a couple of things. There's a lot of wonderful tricks and wonderful workbooks that Mo has actually put forth that is freely available for a lot of you. So of course, if you buy the book, there are some links. And the book is, correct me if I'm wrong, Mo, it's around $20. So essentially, I had my sales center buy it for me. So that's different. So, but for the others, it's $20. It's money well spent. There are some wonderful actually workbooks where you can actually go take a look at it. If on the other hand, if you're really hard pressed for cash, there's also, you can actually go to the website of the Bunnell Idea Group, and you can actually enroll for a series of 8 webinars, 8 short videos that are fantastic. And that's also a great source. But again, if you look at a long career where for some of you who are just beginning, if you're 20, 22, you're going to work till you're 70, maybe 80, the way things are going, that's a great investment for you. And I think some of the advice that you get are things you could use at all stages in your career as well. So I would strongly recommend that you look into buying that book. And more importantly, follow Mo. Make sure you connect with him. He's been nice. He actually connected with me. That says a lot about how nice Mo is. So essentially, I would strongly suggest you take a look at the book as well. And Mo, thank you so much. I know that we have so many other things to discuss. And I want to part with the following, saying that to the extent that Mo has been kind enough to extend us an offer, that we look forward to coming and being part of your courses coming forward in February in Atlanta. So we are going to escape the cold in Indianapolis as well. So, but thank you so much, Mo. Thank you so much for your time, for your patience, and more importantly, for your willingness to give back to Ball State and all the other people out there as well. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I'm so happy we've connected, because we have we have an alignment about how we view the world, and you believe in long-term investments and treating people right and proactively investing in great relationships. So it's just we're at the beginning of helping each other a lot. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks. And have a wonderful day, Mo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Mo Bunnell graduated from Ball State in 1990 and is the founder and CEO of Bunnell Idea Group, who has taught business development skills to over 12,000 people. You can learn Mo's methods in his book, The Snowball System, How to Win More Business and Turn Clients into Raving Fans, at snowballsystem.com, and get a gratis 8-part video training on creating demand at createdemandcourse.com.